All right, welcome back. We are COMP2112, that's client-side scripting and advanced client-side scripting, and the fall 2022 semester at Georgian, and it's week 9, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. And where last we left off, we were talking about, we're way down here, and we're talking about a couple things. We said we're using the map method to iterate through a list of services. And we did that inside of our application in our services component. So here's our services component. Remember, our component emits elements, our custom elements. And we're using the elements component when I go to the, in our app.tsx, when I navigate, as an example, to our services link, it's going to show us our services. That's what it's going to do. So it's pretty cool. And I also use just an example of how to pass in props into our custom elements as well. We can make whatever props we want, where we can pass stuff back into the our custom element by the use of a custom kind of interface or class that defines all the props for that particular element, the properties. Okay, that's what we're doing here. Again, you could always call this thing home props as an example as well. We define a home props interface, and the home props interface is only for the home element if you want to, or you can make it global like we did, but we said it's a model, it's a user model, and that username and display name might be available everywhere across our application. Let's get back to this. I want to talk about React hooks in this part. And this is the part that I really wanted to get to today. So React hooks are, remember we talked about HTML in the early part of our semester, and I said that HTML is stateless. That means if I refresh the screen, any kind of changes or whatever between screen refreshes or renders is gone, okay? But what if I want to remember everything? I want to remember from one refresh to the other information that I've passed into my current session. How do I do that without using a backend, right? Well, I can use a couple of things called hooks. React includes 2 new things called hooks. And what it allows us to do is remember, so maintain state using the state hook, right? And also use special effects using the effect hook. Okay, so we use the use state and use effect method of React, and it allows us to almost like maintain values of the things that we want. Let me talk about this and where they can be used. Here's an example. So I want to, so far we've been importing React, but I want to use my state hook. I would use state. I'll kind of include useState from React as well. We have to import this part, right? And here's what we can do. We declare a pair. Okay, this is kind of interesting. And what it does is it deconstructs our, kind of our value, whatever the value is, into 2 components, if you will, okay? I'm kind of thinking of a word that makes sense. The first component, when we declare a state, right, is the value of that state. For example, if I want to call a state, I want to create a counter, right? Here's an example when I want to create a counter, and the counter itself, basically every single time I click the counter, it updates the thing. It's like key values. But in this case, it's almost like value and then a setter. So value and then a setter. That's really what it's like. A way of modifying the state and a way of keeping its value. I almost think about this as a private instance member, count, right? And a public setter method, set count. So notice that's how it's being used here. I want to read my value from whatever I'm storing. I just use the count object, right? So I say that, count, you clicked X, whatever count times, right? And then And then I want to use set count, and where set count allows me to set the count or modify whatever the current count is to the current count plus one. So it increments the count. When I do that, it happens in real time, and it keeps track of that from one page reload to the next, which is really quite interesting, right? Here, I must use the use state method that's built into React to initialize the value of count. So really what I'm saying here with this variable is, I'm saying let's use state. It's a state variable. And then what I want to do is I want to keep track of this. I want to keep track of the state by dumping in whatever I initialize, this initialization value. I want to initialize it and set it inside of count, right? From count, that's like a getter. And then I would basically inject the count inside of any place I use curly braces like normal, okay? But if I want to set the count, then I can use the set count method. Usually it has the same name as the variable. This is like the variable, the holder, if you will, the getter, right? Same name as the getter, but it's in camel case, right? And what this allows me to do is set anything I put in here, right? Anything I put in here sets the value of my count. So this kind of moves back this way again. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. So why am I showing you this? And why do we need it? Well, we can use it for a lot of different things. Anytime we want to keep track of something, for example, my username. I want to keep track of my username from one page to the other. Am I logged in? Is the user logged in or not? I can set up a is logged in, kind of state, and I can pass it along through a prop or something else from one page to the other page, which is pretty cool, right? So that's kind of how you would do things with use state. So the state hook. Again, use state returns a pair, the current state value, and a function that lets you update it, like we said, like a setter. You can also have multiple states set up inside of a page, right, or a component. For example, here is age. I can set age. Here's const fruit, set fruit. Here's const to-dos, set to-dos, and so on. Okay, and you can see that I can set up whatever default value is. For example, to-dos would be an object, an array of objects, right? Where I set up the first object as learn hooks, as an example, right? So this is kind of the way it would work. So it's amazing what you can do with states, because it allows me to have multiple things like this. Where it's really useful is a contact page. Okay, if I make a contact page and I want to keep track of all the things you type in, right, then I'm going to use states. Okay, the use state hook. The other one that's really popular and that I'm going to be using right now is the effect hook, right? So use effect, which adds the ability to perform side effects. So here's an example of how that's used. I have import, and now I'm using use state and use effect in this particular case. And then again, you get this pair, okay? The first pair, this is for the state, okay? But use effect has its own little method. Think about this as a function that runs every time you go to that page. So every time I go back to this page, it's a function that's going to run almost like a constructor function for this page itself, for the component. Every time I access the component, use effect triggers every single time, right away. Right? It's almost like when the component finishes loading. When the component finishes loading, I want to do something. What do I want to do? Whatever inside the use effect function. That's what I can do, right? Which is pretty awesome. It's a reactive way of coding, which means that when I access the component, then I want to do this. I want to initialize something. I want to do something when I'm doing it. I can also specify how many times I want to do it. Do I want to constantly be updating, like listening for changes to the page or my component, or do I only want to do it once? How many times do I want to use effect? Do I want to do it constantly or one time? Okay. So this is kind of a neat thing that we're going to use. And the way it works is this. When use effect, it triggers, for example, document.title is equal to you clicked X number of times. I can change I can expand on the little clicker app, right, that we're talking about here. When I click on it with my state, it keeps track of the number of times I clicked it, and it's also going to update my document title. So it listens for my document title to be updated, and it updates my document title on the fly. Okay, so because remember what's going to happen is set count is going to almost like refresh that little page, because it's going to keep track of a little counter all the time, right? And because it refreshes, it's going to activate use effect multiple times over and over again. So it's going to show this update. Now it's hard to see how to make this work. So we're going to do it in our code. Let's do it now. So I want to go back to some of the pages that we had. So let's start with the home page. The home page right now uses some props. And what I want to do with the home page is I want to use effect. All right. So when I'm on the home page, I want my app, this one, instead of it saying COMP2112 in the title, I want to change the title to whatever I want. Okay. Now there's many ways to do this, but let's use effect for this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our content here. There we go. And again, from our, kind of our import line, I want to do something like this. I want to put a comma, curly braces, and then type in use effect. Okay. Now there's many of these, right? These are the two that I'm focusing on, but there's other kinds of hooks. It's like an event listener. I want you to think about it as an initialization function. That's what it's like, more than anything else. It's like an event listener, but it's a function that initializes every single time we access the component. So if I load the component one time, it's going to fire it one time, but we need to tell it to only trigger once. And I'll talk about this in a second. So I kind of load my models, and then inside of my function, it has to be in my function itself, I'm going to use effect. So here's use effect. And then I'm going to say something like, let's use an arrow function for this, right? I want to say that, okay, so when I load my home page, I want my document.title to be equal to home, right? Pretty simple, right? Document.title is equal to home. And if I go back to here, right, and if I click on the home link, then my document title is home now. It just changes it up, okay? So pretty straightforward. I could also do it once. So it says, so there's a couple things that I have here. Use effect comes with two components, two parts of it. The first part is, what do I want to do? And the second part is, what's my dependency list? Talk about dependency list in a second. For now, let's just put in an empty empty bracket like this. Okay, something that looks like this. If I do this, it only triggers once. And actually, let me show you when I don't put this. First, let's not put this. Hold on a second. Save. If I don't put this and I go back to my page, here's my page. And if I go Control-Shift-J and take a look at it, everything is good, right? As an example, right? Here's my my page, right? But sometimes what happens is it'll keep on running use effect over and over again forever, right? And we don't want that. So we want to put in no dependencies for this one. So it's only going to work one time. So it says, if present, the effect will only activate if the values in the list change. If the values in the list change. So that's the only time. So anything I put in here, this works really well with state values or props. If the prop changes, so too does use effect. Use a console to show it. Yeah, I could, but what I was hoping for was no errors. But yes, you could do that for sure, because it's going to basically say in here, if I refresh here, there's nothing. But if I was to do one of these, let's do a console log, just to your point, Kyle. Console log. Let's just run a console log that says, home. Okay. Just to show you this thing. Save. Right. And if I go back here to my page, right, here's home. Right. And if I refresh home, if I refresh again, it's going to keep doing home a couple of times, right? It's going to do this as many times as possible, right? And what I really wanted to do is I only wanted to trigger once. So if I wanted to trigger once, I put a square brackets in there, and it's an empty list of dependencies, right? For example, if I change my props, that might be a good thing to put in here. If props changes, then do this again. That's a way of doing it, right? Or if my state changes, do this again. Run use effect over and over again. Right? Every single time something changes. What am I listening for? Back to what Sarah was saying. could be, it could work like a little event listener. All right, let's go back to this. Now, if I refresh, you can see that I've got these two things happening, but it's not going to go beyond that every single time. So it's only going to work one time. It fires it once. By the way, it triggers it twice because of the way that we're putting things into place right now. Okay, so bear with me because it's really actually loading twice. I'll talk about that in a second. All right, so we don't want to do this because we only want to set up our document title once. Let's use that same use effect over and over again. So I want to use effect here, and I also want to use effect for each of my pages. So I want to say I want to do it here. So here's my services. I want to do it before my services start. So I want to do something like this, right? And it says use effect can't be used because I haven't imported it from React. There it is. I can do it that way too, right? So save. And I can do that that's the services page. How about my about page? Same thing. I want to do that, right? And we can change the title in a second. Again, I can go here and go update. So this will be, might as well do this, about, and services will be services. And then we also have projects. Let's put that in there too. And you see me duplicating code. We're duplicating code for a second. So this is projects and use effect. We can use that for that. There we go. And then same thing with contact, right? So our contact page, right? And we can say that use effect. Let's import that in contact. So use effect, all I'm doing is duplicating right now, but you can see that something that triggers when the page loads or when the component loads for the first time. Okay. If I go back to my pages now, I can go home. You can see it says home, about, our projects, our services. It says each child in the list should have a unique key prop. Okay, look at this. And then it says, so it gave us a little bit of some error, right, which we never saw before. Well, that's going on with what we did in our services link. So our services actually it wants two things, right? It wants our service followed by our iterator. Remember this part where I want my iterator, my I, to be a key property that I want to inject in my list item. So I can say something like my class name is this, and then my key property, right, is equal to, again, my I value, which is something that looks like maybe this. There we go. And let's see if that silences that error. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of what it's looking for. And what this actually does, the reason why I asked for that is because that's what it wants for us to do. If I look at the elements, what it's actually doing here in the body tag, when it's injecting our list, so here's our container. And if I go to row, here is what it really looks like, okay? Notice that the key for each item is gone. There is no key element here that we can see. All we see is this stuff, okay, which is kind of cool. This is what it generates for us when we're doing that kind of thing. All right, so we did our projects. We don't have our projects yet, but you can see that that is there too. And each of the names changes the name that it says up here at the top, right? Which is kind of cool. So that's the document title. All right, so that's the use effect very, very quickly. One thing we noticed is that none of these things light up. My home, about us, our projects, our services, and our contact page. Remember, we had this so that the active link would add up, right? It's really for, Kyle, it's really for when we use a list or a list item. If I want to get the key back, if I want to do some operations with the list, that's why it requires it. What React says is basically you're making a list. We want a way to enumerate each item differently, separately, so that each item has its own value. Because internally, what it's doing is it's creating an object, right? And it's creating a key value pairs for the list, almost like a mapping value, right? So that's why it needs it. Or else it tries to do it internally, but it doesn't know what you want, right? It's for React, absolutely. It's React. It's required. So what we want to do here is let's go back to our components here for our header. So our header component just does this, but there's some advanced ways we can use our header component to make it even nicer. And what I mean by that is we want to make it so that the header itself is navigatable, right? It's not just a link, a bunch of links. We want it to be more performant. And one of the ways we can do that is we can add additional things up here at the top. So here at the top, right, I want to add a couple of things here. I'm going to import, here's a new one, okay? I'm going to import nav link, okay, nav link from, and I want to use React Router DOM again, React Router DOM, right? This new thing we added last day. And what nav link will allow us to do is change our application, right? So instead of it being anchor tags with href, which is okay for a regular web page, but not okay for a single page application, we want to change all of our anchor tags now to nav links. That's what I want to use, okay? And what it does, the wrapper knows if it's active or not. Okay, it actually gives us a chance to know if the link is active. I don't have to program this with JavaScript. It's going to produce this for us. As long as I know that I'm on that link, that's the active link, it's going to highlight that page for me. But I need to make some changes to my main navigation instead. So anything I see an anchor tag, I need to replace it with nav link. Okay, and then we have to change the href in a second too. So nav link works like this. So let's just replace all the anchor tags with nav links. I'm just going to show you the change as we go forward. I'm doing this one at a time, right? So that way we can see what it looks like. Again, this is a React thing. Okay, so notice at the end, all the endings are also changed to nav links, right? But we have these ugly hrefs, and what we want to do is change them so that it looks, it works with nav link. The way nav link works, we don't use hrefs. Instead, we use twos. So we say nav link to, and then in curly brackets, we have the path that we're going to, for example, home, okay? And then we can get rid of this part. Well, if that's the case, really what I'm doing is I'm converting this to a two, like so, right? So I can make these all twos. Now you're going to say, why twos instead of hrefs, Tom? Isn't this just a regular anchor tag? Correct. But because we're using nav links, then what we want to do is we want to use the structure that React wants. Just going to kind of do this so we don't have any errors. Okay, and just going to get through that for a second. Bear with me as we restructure our main navigation. And I always find it useful to put everything in curlies, right? So to avoid any issues, I always put the path in curlies like this. I find that it's just, for me, I can avoid problems by doing it this way later on. You might not see this now, but later on you may see it if we continue, depending on how far we get this semester with all this stuff, right? So just trust me and put these curlies around for now. Okay. So this is our new structure now. The only thing I've done is I've removed all the anchor tags, or I should say replaced all the anchor tags with nav links. And nav links require a to property or a to attribute that tells us where we are navigating to. That's what this does, okay? Now, if we set this up like this and save, and if I go back to my page, and if I click on home, now it lights up. Take a look at that. Home lights up, right? About lights up. Our project lights up. And I mean lights up as it shows us that we're in an active state. That's what it does, right? So our services, contact, about, all these things are in active state now. What about though when we go here, and if I go here, well, we haven't navigated anywhere yet, right? And until we do so, nothing is highlighted, okay? So that's kind of weird, right? When I go to the default, if I click onto this, it'll highlight it, but not initially. So that's something we have to conquer later on as well. But that is our new page, our new header. Let's put this up on GitHub because we just updated our header. So I'm going to say something like git add dot git commit -m, and it'll say updated header with nav links. Git push. Okay, so that's what it did. We updated our header. And this is pretty cool, right? So it enables us to do kind of the ability for us to, to have control. What about if I wanted to make a regular link, right? If I want to make a button, like let's say a hero button that says, go to see my page. This is a beautiful thing that I got, my beautiful page. How do I get there? How do I make regular buttons work, right, with React, right? So, or a link that's inside of my page. How do I do that with React? Let's do that with the home page. So when the home page starts, it says, hey, welcome, whoever you are, as an example. And then what I want to do with the home page is, I'm just looking at my notes here, we want to output a button or something else like that. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, again, just like we have nav links, we also have something called links. So I'm going to say import, and again, it's going to be link, right, from React Router DOM. Again, I find this is the easiest way, the best way to get things going. And let's suppose I have an HR or a horizontal rule, and I want to use a link. So then I can have a link. Link also requires two. So a to link to, this is how you would use it. And then what I would say is link to where. Well, that equals to, again, let's say something like I want to go to my about page, right? Could I pull this in curlies too? Like something like this. Does this work? Can I put it in curlies? And it does. Inside the link item, I can make it so that there's a button, and I can make it so that the button has a class name, because it's going to be a bootstrap button, or it's going to have button, button primary, so a big blue button, and button dash large, let's just say. And I might say something like learn about us, learn about us. Learn about us, right? And so what it's doing is it's like wrapping the button tag or the button element inside of an anchor, which is what it kind of is doing, right? But instead of using an anchor, I want to use the routing system, right, for me to route there instead of an anchor. An anchor tag is different, and so was the anchor tag that we used in our main nav. Our main nav actually tried to link to the new page. That's actually slower than using the React router, which actually is internal. So first it says, okay, so the user's requesting a page change. Let's get the data that I have for my page and slam it in, as opposed to, okay, let's refresh the page. Okay, now what does the user want? It's a little bit slower that way if you just use regular href tags. So it's just more efficient this way. So let's see if this works. So again, I'm going back here. You can see now that I have a Learn About Us button. If I click onto it, I'm immediately transported to this. And look, notice the differences. See how I'm not refreshing my page anymore? And before I was? It was hard to see, but if you look at it now, it's actually instant. There is no page refresh anymore because I'm not using href. Okay, this is another reason why you want to use nav, link, and links as opposed to regular href tags. All right, so that is that. Let's add that in. So I'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added link button to home page. Git push. Okay, so that's the example of a link, right? Which is kind of cool. And are you with me? How are you feeling about this? Are you okay with it? Is it freaking you out? Is it okay in terms of code? Okay, I see Kyle's good. Everyone else, how are we doing? How about my friend Elena? Are you okay with all this? And how about Alex or Nicole? I haven't heard from you guys. Or Owen. Okay. I'm going actually slow. I want to make sure that you guys are good. Thanks, Owen. And you might think I'm not going slow, but I really am. I'm not going very fast at all. So the reason why I'm going through this like this is because what if we need all these pieces? What do we do? What do we do here? And that's what I'm saying. What if I need this? How do I do this? I do it like this, with React, right? Okay. So kind of cool stuff. Let's see what else that I was missing from this. I want to put my contact page together, and I want to think about how I'm going to keep track of my contact information, right? So again, one thing to note is I'm not going to, kind of send stuff. Let's make a little contact form. And I kind of talked about this briefly before. Here's my contact us, but I want to make a contact form. That's what I want to do, right? And in my contact form, right, I want to use a something from Bootstrap. Let's see if we can do that from Bootstrap. So we'll practice a little bit of Bootstrap too. So I'm going to go back to Bootstrap, and I'm going to go to components, and if you look here, there's forms. Here's our form component, and form comes with a bunch of baked code. Looks like this, right? And what I want to do, I'm just thinking now, what I want to do is I want to take this component and change email address and password to, stuff that I want to get from the user. Like, for example, I want to get their full name, contact number, and email address. Those are the three things I need. I have an email address already, but I want to get these things. How do I do them? So let's copy this form from Bootstrap. Copy it here. This is actually here. I'll give you the link for it. So this is the form I'm getting, right? I want to copy this form right here, right? And I want to modify this form in my code. So I'm going to go back to my code, right? And underneath my H horizontal rule, let's say, I want to put in my form, okay? Here's my form, but you know that this is no good, right? And it's no good for a bunch of reasons. The first one is class has to change to class name. So again, I'm going to say, I want to replace everything here. So if I go Control F to find, and if I change this to replace, I want to find anything that says class, and I want to change it to class name. Okay. Now we don't want to change all of them because I don't want to do this one. I just want to change the other ones. So I'm going to go next, right? And I'm going to replace this one. So replace, and then replace, place, place, place. Place. So those are all changed. The other thing is that it doesn't like fors. Remember, we kind of talked about this before. It doesn't like fors, and it doesn't like the input. The input, the reason why that's a problem is because at the end of the input, we don't have a closing tag. It's not self-closing. That's what it's looking for. It's very specific. It wants all of our HTML to be perfect, right? That's what it demands. So let's do that. So we'll change all those just to make sure that we take care of our errors. And the other one is for the fors in their labels, right? Because we have labels and everything else. If you hover over this, it tells you, do you mean HTML4? And yes, we do. We want that instead. So it's an HTML4 instead of for, because for is a reserved word, as in a for loop. Can't use for. So again, it's the same thing here. So we can't, anytime, any place that has for, it has to be changed to HTML4 because that's what makes sense with React, because it's using JavaScript, and for is a reserved word, which means a for loop. Okay, we can't do that. Remember that the code we're using here is not HTML, it is JSX, it's JavaScript. Okay. All right, cool. So that's what email addresses. We don't care about actually a password. I don't want one of those. And I definitely don't want a checkbox, so we can get rid of those. And I want to start with this one element in the form and the button. So let's start with those two things. So I want the email address. And again, the HTML4 is for the ID. Instead of email help, as an example, we should probably call this email address. So this is the email address. Okay. And this other thing that says small, will never share your email with anyone else. We can get rid of it. I don't care about that. And then the ID is email address. I just got rid of that. And then I want to take this same ID and put it as the HTML4. That's what it looks like. ARIA described by, again, it's, you can say email address input, right? And then my placeholder is enter email, right? That's what it would be, enter email. That's the placeholder that I might put in there as well, okay? So that is your first element in the form, or first input in the form. Let's see what that looks like. And does it even look good? Do we have to do something with the form to make it look nicer? and blah, blah, blah. Let's go back to our page and see what our contact looks like. Well, it does look pretty bad right now because it just has this email address and enter email here and a submit button. We're going to fix this up. So I don't want it to be so large. So I'm going to wrap my form in another div tag. Oops. So in here, I'm going to wrap my form in a div tag. I'm going to say that the div tag has a class name. Put this in there. And the class name is going to be row justify, right? I'm going to say justify content large center. And I also want a gutter of 3. That's what I want in there. So I'm just going to do this over here first, and then I'll take the div tags and I'll put them out. I'll take my form and put it inside there. And then inside my div tag here, I want to have another I want to take my form now, this form itself, cut it, and put it inside of here. There we go. Let's make sure that it is done like this. Okay, and my form is also going to have a class name. So I'm going to say class name for the form is equal to column-large-6. So when it's large screen, it's going to be 6 columns. That's what that means. And then column-medium-10. When it's a medium screen, it's going to take up more space, right? Maybe we'll change that to smaller. And column-small-10. I think maybe I might want to make this something like 6 as well. Maybe 6 for medium and maybe 8 for large. I don't know. Let's see what that looks like. And if I go back, you can see that it certainly does this. So it centers everything. That's what this is. Row justify content large center. So it centers the content in the middle. That's my form itself. I can, if I wanted it over here, I could have put it over there. And then if depending on how big my page is, if I make it like this big, it takes up 10 columns. Notice how this works still, right? Which is good. It also highlights the contact us page here, right? And so far, so good. This looks okay. What I also want to put in here is sometimes what I find more comfortable than this is a div that gives me an input group. So if I go back to Bootstrap, this is cool. And here are different form controls here that I can use. One of the form controls is a text area. So I definitely want a text area for the message, right? Which is kind of what I want here. Let's grab this text area, right, for the message. Again, this is in the next part where it says form controls, right? So text area. And if I grab this form group and go back here, then the text area should be something like here, right? I'm just copy pasting again. So we're going to put that in there. And now notice that it's another form group. I need to change this to class name and HTML4. HTML4, yeah. And this will be class name. Right, there we go. And what about rows? Because rows is, again, something that's an issue. How do I do rows? Because rows, it says a type that's declared but is never used. How do I do rows in Bootstrap? Because here I got a text area and I got rows. Well, for us, we just take it out. That's what we do. It's automatic. And we're going to say the ID for the text area is our message, right? So this is the HTML4 for the message. And we'll say your message. And we can also have some placeholder text and a bunch of other stuff here as well. And maybe an ARIA label, which is probably what we want to do, which is going to tell us a little bit more for screen readers what this is. So maybe an ARIA.label that is going to label this thing as message area, right? Something like that, which you want to kind of for compatibility purposes, right? So something that looks like this. And then if I kind of go there and look back, look back here, then you can see that again, we've got, my email address and my message. All right, so Kyle Duffy says, Bootstrap did a bad job styling their dropdown menu. Yeah, it's pretty bad, isn't it? I mean, if I did this, right? This isn't some great styling here. You can always change this later up with your own styles, which I agree with. It's true. It is ugly. All right, let's go back to this. So, but I want some spacing. I want some spacing right here and here, because it's like these things are all together. So we can add some spacing here, but then it's almost like I want to run kind of around this item as well. So here I've got a div with a class name of form group, right? That's what I want. And I can add margin bottom 3. I can do that for each one of them. I can say margin bottom 3 for this one and that one. So save. And you can see now that it splits up the form a little bit. Okay, it's looking a little bit better, not much, but a little bit. And let's say I want to make another thing. The type is email, but I want to get full name. Oops. I want to get full name here. Okay, so I'm just copy pasting my email address one time, right? And this will be full name, like so. And this will be a type text in here. And what I want to do here is this is the full name. So again, with full name, think about this, the ID as the ID. One thing we also are missing from here is the name property, right? The name property represents our variable when it comes to code, right? So name is equal to also full name. So name and ID. And same thing with, ID here. We want to put the ID and a name, right? And same thing with this, the ID and a name, right? Because the name is going to be the same. I probably think that the full name and the email address is required. So I probably want to put required in here as well. So I can say something like at the end, I want to say required is something that I want in here, right? And same thing goes with the other ones. I want to have my form kind of have a little bit of HTML validation right now with required. I probably don't care about the message. As long as I get your full name and email address, I might respond to you. But maybe we want to say, that the message is not required. But I think the 3 pieces of information I want is your full name, email address, maybe a contact number, right? Then I know that it's a real person. So I'm not being spammed. So again, it's of type text. And instead of email address, this is going to be full name, right? So that's what the thing is going to be here. I think I've got everything here. And it should say your placeholder, if we have a placeholder, should say something like enter your full name, enter your email address. So something like that. And then full name input for ARIA described by. So we'll tell them, people who are using a screen reader, what they're listening to. And then as well as, let's go something like this. Let's also add in a contact number. So full name, contact number, and then email address. Let's do the contact number second. So we'll put the contact number here. Contact number, right? And here will be the contact number. And we'll use the same contact number for the email, the ID and the name, right? The type will be, for the contact number will be tel. So it'll be that kind of keyboard that'll pop up in a mobile device, right? Again, the type pulls up a different keyboard according to the input type on a mobile device, right? Typically. And this will be the contact number input, right? And I'll say something like enter your contact number here. Contact number, right? That's required. I think those 3 things should be required. This is not so required. Again, I have a button that is a submit button. And I might have a button, maybe the button should have a ID as well. So again, the ID is going to be submit button. Okay, so we know if I want to access this with code, I can do that. It has button primary, and I can also have some using Font Awesome, I can have an I tag where I have a class name, let's say for this one, which is something like maybe FAS FA envelope. So it looks like you're going to submit something, and then FA large. So that's going to give us a little font icon that gives us like a little envelope there. Okay, and maybe I want another button for cancel. So this is like kind of this button and maybe another button too for now. So here's a second button. Instead of a submit button, I'll have a reset button, which will be the cancel button. There's a cancel button with the name button. Instead of button primary, let's use button warning. So it'll be the yellow button, and then it'll be FA undo instead of the envelope. Undo. And this will say cancel. Oh. There we go. All right, so that is our little form. Okay, it's not too crazy, but that gives us more context to work with when it comes to our screen. Let's take a look and see how this looks on our up online. So let's go back here, and you can see here is what our contact form will look like. Now there is a little bit of spacing in here, that I wouldn't mind. How do I add some spacing between the buttons? What would I do if I wanted some spacing between the buttons there? What other things can you do there? It's actually quite simple to do. There's a bunch of ways we can do it. We can do margins for each of the buttons, right? And I can say for the submit button, I have a margin right of 1 or whatever I want, right? So let's do that. If I wanted to do that, I can say the submit button has a class name of button primary, but what if I said, I also want to have a margin right of 1? Is that possible? And does that work? And no, not quite. What about if it was something else? What kind of margin could I have, that I can put in there? ME auto, I could do that. Margin end, right? And margin end 1. How about if I said margin end 1? 1 does 1. And if I do 2, that might look a little better. So that's a little bit of space in there. ME, right? Margin end, margin start, instead of margin right, margin left. This changed. All right, so that's kind of looking a little better, but again, it's still pretty basic. And you can add in your other styling in here as well. But more or less, it's good. And if I don't enter this stuff, I press submit here, it's going to say, nope, you need to fill out this area. This is default styling that comes with a contact button, a contact form. So why did I build this? Because any kind of form will allow us to do maintain state, right? So if I start typing stuff, it'll actually, keep track of the state as I type. So what if, I just wanted to put it out there, right? As I'm typing stuff, I want the form to output to my console window. So Control-Shift-J. I want my console window, let's refresh. So to show that as I'm typing in here, as I'm doing this, I want my console window to show my stuff. How do I do that, right? So back to the code. So here is code. That's what this is. It looks like HTML. Let's put this up on GitHub so you can have it too. So let's do that again. So I'll say git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added basic HTML form or contact form. And I mean basic, git push. We can make it way nicer than that. All right, so now that we have done that, we've pushed this out. What I want to do is I want to think about use state. So not just use effect, but use state. Okay. So again, very interesting ways of doing this, this kind of thing as well. And I want to think about, right, how this is going to run for us. And I mean that in that, I want to make sure that I have, kind of everything I want in here. I want to have the full name. I want to have the contact number. I want to have the email address, and all those could be state maintained. I want to keep track of all those things. If I'm going to put them out to, kind of our console, or should I use effect, right? So that's something that we can think about. When something changes, then use effect changes, right? Kind of thing. So I can do that too. And so let's do this. So it says, so if I want use effect and as well as use state, let's see if I can do this. So there's use state and use effect. You can see that's not used right now. And just like we had here in the PowerPoint, let's follow the structure for the PowerPoint where I want to have a const and I want to have two things for each of the form elements, right? So I want to do something like up here at the top. It doesn't matter where, by the way, but typically you want to do, kind of one or the other. So think about, how this is going to work when I do this thing, right? I want to have my a bunch of stuff here at the top before my use effect. So something like, let's think about this. I want to have a const, and I have my full name, right? That's the first thing first. So it's going to be called full name, right? That's the thing that's going to be called full name. And the second part is set full name. Okay, so that's the way that the hook would look like. And that's going to be equal to, we need to use the use state method, use state, and I want to initialize it with something. So initially, I initialize it with nothing. So it's kind of doesn't have anything initially in there, right? And I want to do the same thing with contact number and email address. Let's put that in there too. So we'll say, so one of those, and I'll copy paste. So it can't be the same name. So this will be contact number. Hear me out. So set contact number. Right, and I'm going to say use state. There's nothing in there at the beginning, and then full name. This part here will be email address, and we'll say set. Undo. Set email address, like that. Email address. There we go. And then so we've kind of set up these states that we want here originally as well, right? There we go. So that's where these things are inputting for the first time. Okay, so full name, contact number, email address. And then what I can do is, so when I change something, and what I mean was when I change my full name or my email address or whatever, when I change something, sure, we can do that. Sorry about that, Sarah. Yes, absolutely. Are you good now? Are you up to date? Okay. So again, so let's take a look here, right? So we have, again, just our use state for full name, contact number, and email address. And I want to make a little event. I want to make when I change my full name, when I change my contact number, when I change my email address, I want it to trigger something to happen. Okay, so I want to make a couple of events, and I want to use functions for these. Let's use a function, and we're going to call this on change full name. Okay, and what I want is, I want this to be an event type. So how it's going to look is, we're going to use the E for the event, and I'll go through here and I'll say something like E is of type change event, and I want to pass in there an HTML input element, which is what we're getting. So I'm basically changing I'm saying that all of my events, it's of type React change event. That's what it is, right? So on change full name is going to detect when there's a change in my full name. That's what I'm going to use it for. And what I want is I want to console log. Here's something I can do. I want to console log out my full name. That's what I want. Okay, so when I'm typing it in, I want to output this. Okay, let's do the same thing for the other ones. Function. So on change contact number. And again, we'll do the same. I'll just copy paste this for a second. And like so. And I'll do the same thing, console log. You can see this is exactly the same. It might give you a sense of maybe there's another way of doing this. There we go. So contact number. And then one more, we'll do just copy paste this time. Right? And we'll say on change email address. We'll do two more. Actually, this one in the message area as well, because we didn't have the message area in here. We'll have to fix that. And this is console log email address. Okay. And we didn't add that in. Let's add in a message area as well. So we're going to keep track of the message area. So we'll say message, right, which is set message. So again, I'm creating two pairs, right? The getter or the holder of the data and the setter. How do I set that data later on? Okay. So a full name, contact number, email address, message. I've got all that, right? And then once I've set that up, one more, do a function. Actually, we'll just copy paste just to make it quick because I'm going to run out of time here. And that's why I'm going a little faster than normal, right? So change message. On change message, then I'm going to change the message. Now I'll put the message. Okay, good. So those are little functions that basically are going to take care of this. Now I could have written this inline, okay? But I wanted to show you that you can respond to an event with functions as well, like so, okay? So why did I write these things? I wrote them because, and I'm just going to copy paste this into the chat if you wanted to do what I'm doing. So I'm going to put this into for you guys if you want to copy that stuff and put it into your code underneath this part. And you also, of course, need these parts. This part here is the actual stuff for the state. So the state has to be put up there as well as this part right here, okay? And then once I've got the state and the functions here, what I want to do is when I enter data in my form, I'm going to say that I can have an on change event, So you can do that anywhere in your form. So in the form itself, where it says placeholder and required, let's split this form up a little bit. I'm going to split it by aria so we can see it in on one page, maybe across multiple lines. So something that looks like this. So it's not as bad. This is not going to split over a couple of pages. There we go. That's what the form will look like now. And what I can do is I can also include another little attribute called on. Notice that there's like a lot of these in there. These are all React events because remember, this is not HTML. This is JSX. If I say on change, and I want to mention when I'm changing that I want to have the on change full name, that's what I want to use. Notice that it lights up. So when I change the full name, on change full name, this function will trigger. This function will trigger when I change the full name. And I can do the same thing with on change. And I want to say on change contact number. There it is, on change contact number. And I can do the same thing with this one, on change email address. And I'll do that one. And then finally, the last one would be, and again, I have to do it. I have to do it here. I'll just do it right here. On change message. There we go. So what this does is it says, now there's a couple of things here. The message thing, it says two things. It says it's not of type HTML input element, right? Because all of these, the full name, contact number, email address, and message, well, the first three are input elements. This one is not an input element. It's an area, text area, right? That's what this is. So maybe I can modify this, the change event type, to an HTML, and it's almost like a text area, right? So that's what I want to say. Text area element is what I want to change the last on change message, because it's a different kind of event that I'm getting, right? And maybe that computes now, right? Which is okay, okay? So again, let's go back. So I made the function. It has a little parameter. The parameter is the event type, the event that I'm getting. And I can do something with that event. For example, I can do a prevent default. I want to prevent the default behavior for that event. Or I want to do something with that event. I can read the event itself. But let's see if this works, if I'm able to put this up. Now, I'm going to put this up on GitHub. And give me 1 second while we do that. So Control S. And I'll say git add dot, git commit minus M, and we'll say updated contact form with some events, we'll say. Hit push. Okay, and I'll just give you guys a sec to grab that if you need to, because I know I went a little fast there. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll continue. I know we're timing out, guys, but I need you guys just to do a couple more things, and then we've talked about a little bit of state, a little bit of the use state and the use effect, which kind of gives us a sense of how this works. Let me know you guys when you guys are ready, when you guys have what I have. So this is what I've got here, and again, I put it up on GitHub so you guys can be ready to go. Thank you, Kyle. Anyone else? Ready? Owen's good. Alex is good. Amit, it's good. Excellent. Tyler's good. Okay. Nicole's good. Awesome. That's great. Fantastic. All right, guys. Well then, how about Sarah? Sarah, did you catch up, or did I kill it already? I may have killed it already. Wait for you. I'm sorry. All right, let's continue. So let's do this. So now that I got this, what does it look like online? So if I go back online here, right, and let's take a look at the Control-Shift-J, so I can see the console here. Let's refresh to make sure that everything is there. And what if I start typing in, like, Tom, right? Notice it says there's 3 updates, right? And when I go over, there's it says 3, but I don't get anything out there. I don't have anything that's been set. Huh? What happened? How come it didn't work? I got 3 updates every single time I type something, like, for example, my number 416-555-5555. It did all those. It actually outputted something to the console, but it's empty. I want my whatever I've got in here to be output to the console, right? So how's that? Well, we did one part of it on change when this changed, right? I want to set everything, right? So that, when I change something, I want to set the name to whatever the name is here. How do I set the name that I've got in my form, right, itself? So I want to change the name that I have here in my name field, right, full name. How do I do that? And by the way, full name and everything is full name, right? Notice that these are here. These are not grayed out, right? Because I've used them here, right? But I want to use this information. So on change, I want to be able to grab that information and put it up there, right? So, I mean, it's almost like if I was going to take the value that I want, right? So whatever my value is, I want to set it. So I want to say my value, right, is equal to my whatever I've set in there. So for example, my full name. What if I did that, right? So let's just try it with 1. So value is equal to full name. If I go back there, it's going to go wham. Let's refresh. If I say, okay, so I start typing, I can type. It's going to tell that I'm typing, but it's not letting me do anything in here. It doesn't let me interact. Why? Because, well, whatever full name was, which is use state, right, is bad, right? I want to kind of hook into, what's happening here. And I want to do it with my form. So when I enter the form, right, it's almost like I want to, when I get the information, right, I want to get the full name, the contact number, and the email address, and I want to get them from my form. And there's 2 parts to it, right? There's like my data that I'm getting, the data that I'm getting itself, right? from the form itself. That's what I want to do. The form is giving me that data, right? So how do I get it? That's the thing that I can't do, because right now, so far, all I'm doing is this actually sets the value back to what it was. So that's not the way to do it. It's almost like I want to say that full name is equal to full name, right? On this, what if we changed the name of, yes, but how? Set full name to what? So if I said set full name, but how do I get that value? Now, if I go E dots, you can see that I can look at the current target, right? And I want to be able to get the value, right, of what I want. So almost like the value of the object that I'm on right now, right? So it doesn't, I mean, I could probably do something like this, e.target.value, right? But is this going to give me what I want? E.target.value. Let's see what it does. Yeah. So if I did set name.e.target.value, E means the event, target is the thing that I'm looking at, and the value of the target is whatever I've got in the value right now. All right, let's see if it's true. Save. And if I refresh, and if I go back to this and type in Tom, then I got TOM. I got TOM, right? And if I do the same thing, so I kind of did something there, right? It was okay. I typed in the last character, and then it did it, but it's like, I need to set the full name to the last value, okay? And then it only did 3 of the elements. Let's do the same thing. Set full name. I'm going to say set contact number here, set contact number. Okay. And I'll do the same thing with email address. Set email address to e.target.value. Target is the target element. Value is the value of that element. How about this one? Will it work? So let's see. So set message to e.target.value, right? So it looks like we're okay with that. And if I start typing in all of it, right? So if I do that, if I say something like this, refresh, and if I start typing Tom, right? You can see that that's okay. And then contact number 416-555-5555, right? And then email address, so tom@example.com, .com, right? Notice that it got rid of the last character, all right, which is interesting. And then your message, which is, hello. Okay. So that is all of this, which isn't so bad, right? And what this does is it gives us a chance to have something called, it allows us to do this two-way data binding thing that we're doing right now. Once I type stuff in here, I can produce somewhere else what I'm actually typing in, all right? So it's kind of a way of doing it in line without doing anything. And we can do that with our use state, which is, again, right with only front-end technologies, which is pretty cool, okay? Again, there's still some issues, like every time we press a number, we're doing it, but when I press tab, it doesn't really do that on the on change event, right? There's other on functions, right? So for example, if I go on, and if I go on focus, right? So when I get focus, and if I type focus in general on, these are all the different kinds of events that I can use. On blur, so when I'm losing focus, maybe it also is going to go to on change full name, right? So on blur, right? Then I can do the same thing. I can say whether I'm typing or whether I'm on change full name, I can use the same change event, right? Let's see, on change full name, right? And if it's got a problem, it's going to tell you it's got a problem, right? So this is something that I can do over and over again. Well, then we'll stop for the day, guys. I'm just going to copy paste here so you can see that this works. So on change full name, on change contact number, and then on change email address, and this will be on change message. So why did I do both? And I don't need both. Typically, I only need one on blur. Blur means when I move from one thing to the other, right? And if I press save and I go back out here and refresh, and then, do one of those. Let's try this again. So Tom, notice that when I tab over, it takes Tom now, right? So 416-555-5555 has the whole thing. And my email address is tom@example.com, right? You can see that it took that. And my message is hello from Tom, right? And then if I press tab to go to my submit button, everything has been entered and all these things. And I've kept track of everything. Now here's the last thing. If I click submit, right, it erases everything. And of course I don't want that, right? So we can have an event for the form itself. So for the form, we can have a little event called onSubmit, where it's equal to, we'll call this the submit form, right? Function. We don't have a submit form function yet, so that's why it kind of gave us this. Let's make one, right? So then let's see what happens with this, right? So we'll say something like function, right? And we'll call this submit form, and we'll make it on submit form. How about that? Just to be the same as everything else, right? And this time we're going to flip the bird because you don't want. It's funny how this one works on submit form, and I'm going to say that e.prevent default value, prevent default, and my prevent default is going to be able to console out the message. So I can say console log, let's grab all these things and just do it all at once. So console log this, and we'll console log that, we'll console log everything, and we'll console log all these things. I know this is a simple example, but I want you to get how I have access to all of my data through my state variable, okay? So that's what my onSubmit form will do, right? And it'll be triggered by for the form itself. The form has an onSubmit event, which I can use. Let's do this one more time. So save, and let's go. I'll put this up on GitHub for you. So just in case you're running behind, because I'm going fast now, git commit -m, and we'll say updated contact form to output data to console, hit push. Okay, there it is. And now let's go back to this and try it again. Refresh, just to make sure there's nothing stuck. And then 416-555-5555, and then tom@example.com. You can see that's working. And then hello from Tom, right? And if I click submit, now I'm going to get everything. There's all that stuff all ready to go. Okay, so really, I don't need all those little events, right? I just need on blur when I move over if I have everything, and then I can do my my checking and everything else that I have everything here. Thoughts? What are your thoughts, guys? Difficult, easy, for when it comes to state? What are your thoughts on how we can use state and effect hooks in our code? And you can come on the mic for this if you want before we leave. I know we're running over, so if you want to come on the mic, we can talk about it. So again, pretty straightforward in terms of the way they work. I know it's a lot. Elena's like, it's a lot. It is a lot, right? But the idea here is that we're learning how to use React, right? And today we talked about hooks and how hooks work. So the way hooks work is we have a couple of things that we've added in. Actually, notice that when I started typing and I wanted to do this change event, it detected the change event that was going to be used. I didn't actually put in change event. As soon as I started using change event here in for TypeScript to respond properly, it was pretty cool, like in terms of the way it was working. Okay, so here I have change event, use effect, and use state. Use effect and use state are two hooks, right? All the parts of the React make sense. How they work together is still a mystery. And that's how it's probably going to stay, Kyle, for a while. And the reason for this is because, remember, it's a black box. And this, I know, but this black box is something that is like, remember, it's declarative. You tell React what you want, and then it does what you want, right? As opposed to you figuring out all the underlying details of how this is all working. And remember, we're also doing just-in-time React, because if I was going to go through all the details here, then we don't have a lot of time this semester to do everything. So I'm trying to give you everything you need to get going, okay? More than every little detail. And you're going to have a lot of time to look at it yourself. This is going to give you just enough. So when you go up online, you can look it up and go, okay, I know I need some kind of a hook. I know I need some kind of, I want to do this. How do I do this with React? You can look it up, whatever this is. And then once I've given you this, you'll say, oh, okay, this is what, these people are saying, whatever tutorial you're looking at. And I understand how this fits in, because this is a hook, or this is I'm injecting code here. I'm using a map or something like that. You see that a lot in React, okay? And that's what I'm hoping to get for you, at least for this semester. Absolutely, Kyle. Okay, so yes, we can totally do that. So when we change the state, then we can run the event. We can do lots of stuff that's here. And I think it's good for you to experiment. Okay, for your in-class exercise 6, the only thing I need you to do is whatever I've done, you put it up online, you demonstrate that you've made it work for you. I'm good to go. You've got your marks, okay? So questions coming in are, as a developer, when you are presented with a project, how do I decide to make it React or not? It really depends on the size of the project, right? So if it's a small project and, my front end is not going to require a back end or something like that, you know what? I may use just a React, because I don't want to, duplicate code, right? And it's definitely a little bit lighter weight. I want to say that, but it's not really true. It's a little bit lighter weight than something like Angular, if I was going to choose a front-end framework. Coding it by myself, I would never use WordPress. I don't use WordPress unless I'm going to give the customer some kind of content management system. I'm not going to build my own content management system. That doesn't make sense unless they don't want to use WordPress or their backend isn't PHP. So it's really, you got to look at the technologies that the client is willing to use or that's able to use. What is their current? What do they have? Because for the most part, you and I aren't involved with greenfield projects. We don't make random projects from nowhere. We kind of look at a site and then we modify it. We do a lot of modification or updating of sites. That's what we do. So because we do updating, what does the client currently have? What does their content look like right now? How is it laid out? And if the client's content is laid out in a way that needs an update and it needs to be responsive, I want to give it a responsive front end that works, across multiple viewport sizes. I'm probably going to use something like Bootstrap or something else, some other kind of front-end CSS framework to start at least. And then if I'm someone like Nicole, who's, let's say, awesome with CSS, then maybe I'll kind of go in there and swap things around and make it my own, so it doesn't look so bootstrappy. You know what I'm saying? Because then it's going to look too bootstrappy the entire time. So that's the first thing. I look at kind of like, what do they have, and then where are they going? What's their future looking like? Are they going to be connected to a backend? Well, if they're definitely going to be connected to a backend, then I'm going to think, is my front end that I'm writing right now, is it going to be compliant or compatible with potentially a backend API where I'm going to connect to some data in the backend? If that's true, I'm going to choose between Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, some kind of front end framework. And because React is so popular, and if I'm working with other developers, this is another thing to think about. If I'm working with other developers that are also conversant with React, then I'm going to use React, right? If everyone is using Angular, I'm probably going to use Angular or Vue or Svelte or whatever, right? But typically I like to use React right now anyway, because it's hot, it's out there, a lot of people are using it, and it's fairly straightforward. It's easy to use. There's a lot of documentation. That's another reason why I'd use that framework. The documentation is a huge thing, right? Because if I was using a brand new framework, like let's say something like Svelte, maybe the documentation and the use cases would be a lot smaller. So then maybe that would be something I would play with, but not really use until it's developed a little bit, it's matured, right? So I think React is a mature framework, and so is Angular. So I kind of choose between those two. Okay, I don't know if that's kind of a long answer, but that's my answer, right? So, for Svelte, yeah, it is. It's getting better, but it's like I still, from a maturity perspective, they're still making quite a few changes, and it bugs me. So that's why I stay with something like React or Angular typically. Exactly. That's why I have a problem. Yeah. So because if it was in full release, like final release mode, cool. If it's like a, a stable release, okay. But if I'm dealing with something that's going to change tomorrow, I don't know. I don't know if I would do that. Okay, guys, we went way over time. I know we talked about this. I'm going to stick around just in case you have any questions for anyone who wants to talk to me directly. But that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this session. And just to wrap it up, just to kind of circle back to what we talked about. Let's get back up to the top here. We talked about what JSX is. So you should have more of a understanding of what JSX is compared to last time. Last time we kind of just ran through it really quickly. Thanks, Elena. We talked about React hooks and the React router in a little bit more detail. And we kind of rebuilt our single page application a little bit better this time around. We're going to continue to rebuild it. And next week, what I'd like to try and do is start thinking about full CRUD with React. How do I do full CRUD? I'm going to put together a little, a book list or something like that, or our favorite TV show as an example. And we'll kind of see how we can iterate through that and where we can hold that data. If we're going to access that data from a database, let's see how that works. Okay. Otherwise, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time. And I'm going to stop recording this and I'll take any questions that people might have after class. And stop recording. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do